On a hot morning in South Africa, an army of thousands of British soldiers stood confidently on African soil. They carried powerful rifles, wore modern uniforms, and believed they were facing an enemy that could never defeat them. But hidden across the hills were thousands of Zulu warriors. They were not supposed to win. The British Empire was one of the strongest powers on earth. Its soldiers had fought battles across the world. They believed their technology, discipline, and experience would crush the Zulu Kingdom within days. But on January 22, 1879, everything changed. In a battle that shocked the world, a Zulu army surrounded and destroyed a British force at Isandlwana. It became one of the greatest military victories in African history. This was the day the Zulu warriors proved that courage, strategy, and unity could defeat even the most powerful empire. This is the story of the battle where Africa defeated Britain. The Zulu Kingdom was not just a small group of warriors. It was a powerful nation built on discipline and military organization. Years earlier, the legendary leader Shaka Zulu transformed the Zulu people into one of the most feared fighting forces in southern Africa. He introduced new weapons, new training methods, and a powerful battlefield strategy. Zulu warriors trained from a young age. They learned endurance, teamwork, and loyalty to their kingdom. Their famous fighting style was known as the horns of the buffalo. The main force, called the chest, would attack the enemy directly. The two sides, known as the horns, would move around and surround the enemy. The reserve force, called the loins, waited behind to finish the battle. It was a strategy designed not only to attack, but to completely destroy the opponent's ability to escape. But by 1879, the Zulu Kingdom faced a dangerous enemy. The British Empire wanted greater control over southern Africa. They believed the independent Zulu Kingdom was standing in the way of their expansion. British officials created tensions with the Zulu King Cetshwayo and eventually demanded changes that the Zulu people could not accept. When these demands were rejected, Britain declared war. The Anglo-Zulu War had begun. The British Army entered Zululand believing victory would come quickly. They had thousands of trained soldiers, modern rifles, artillery, and military experience from conflicts around the world. Many British commanders underestimated the Zulu warriors. They believed traditional weapons like spears and shields could never defeat modern firearms. But they made one dangerous mistake. They underestimated their enemy. On January 22, 1879, a British force under Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pouliane camped near a mountain called Isandlwana. The British soldiers believed they were safe. But they did not know that a massive Zulu army was moving closer. Around 20,000 Zulu warriors prepared for battle. They waited. They watched. And then they attacked. The Zulu commanders used patience and strategy. Instead of rushing into British fire, they moved carefully and surrounded the enemy. When the battle began, British soldiers opened fire with their rifles. For a moment, it looked like technology would win. Hundreds of Zulu warriors fell as bullets filled the battlefield. But the Zulu army continued moving forward. Wave after wave, they pushed closer. The British soldiers struggled to maintain their defensive lines. Ammunition supplies became a problem, communication broke down, and the Zulu warriors reached them from multiple directions. Then the famous buffalo horn strategy came into action. The Zulu forces surrounded the British army. The escape routes disappeared. The battlefield became chaos. Despite their training and weapons, the British soldiers were overwhelmed by the determination and numbers of the Zulu warriors. After hours of fighting, the British position collapsed. More than 1,000 British and colonial soldiers were killed. The Zulu Kingdom had achieved a victory that few people believed was possible. News of Isandlwana spread across the world. A European empire had suffered a shocking defeat against an African army. The victory showed that the Zulu warriors were not simply fighters with traditional weapons. They were skilled soldiers with powerful tactics, discipline, and leadership. However, the war was not over. Britain responded with a larger force and eventually defeated the Zulu Kingdom later in the conflict. But the memory of Isandlwana remained. The battle became a symbol of African resistance and military achievement. It showed the world that even the strongest empires could face defeat when they underestimated their opponents. The Zulu warriors at Isandlwana did not just win a battle. They created a moment that history would never forget. A moment when thousands of African warriors stood against one of the world's greatest empires and proved that determination and strategy could change the course of history. The Battle of Isandlwana remains one of Africa's greatest victories, a reminder that courage has no boundaries and that even the most powerful forces can be challenged. This was the day Zulu warriors destroyed the British Army. The day Africa shocked the world. But the story of Isandlwana was not only about a single victory. It was about the power of a nation that refused to surrender. For generations, the Zulu warriors became remembered not only for their weapons, but for their discipline, bravery, and incredible unity on the battlefield. The men who fought at Isandlwana were defending more than just their land. They were defending their independence, their culture, and their way of life. The victory created a moment that shocked the British Empire. Newspapers around the world reported the defeat. Military leaders studied what happened and tried to understand how an army using traditional weapons could defeat one of the most advanced armies of the 19th century. The answer was not simply numbers. The Zulu victory came from preparation, leadership, and strategy. The Zulu commanders understood the battlefield. They knew when to attack, when to wait, and how to surround a stronger enemy. They turned the landscape into an advantage. They used speed, movement, and teamwork to overcome a force that had better technology. But history is often complicated. After the defeat at Isandlwana, Britain returned with a much larger army. The conflict continued, and eventually the Zulu Kingdom was defeated. King Cetshwayo was captured, and the independence of Zululand was greatly weakened. Yet the victory at Isandlwana could never be erased. Because battles are not remembered only by who wins the war. They are remembered by the moments when ordinary people achieve something extraordinary. The Zulu warriors at Isandlwana became a symbol of resistance against overwhelming power. Their story continues to inspire people around the world because it shows that strength is not only measured by weapons or technology. Sometimes, strength comes from unity. Sometimes, strength comes from courage. And sometimes, history is changed by those who were never expected to win. The Battle of Isandlwana remains one of the most powerful chapters in African military history. It reminds us that every nation has stories of heroes, struggles, and victories that deserve to be remembered. But the history of Africa is filled with many more incredible moments. From legendary kings who built powerful empires, to warriors who defended their lands against impossible odds, Africa has produced leaders and battles that changed the world. In our next video, we will explore another incredible African story. A story of a leader whose ambition, intelligence, and military power created one of the greatest empires in history. A story of a man who became known as the Lion of Africa. So make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you do not want to miss the next chapter of Africa's forgotten history. The past is full of stories waiting to be discovered, and the next one may surprise you.